most of the big startups, this question is asked: call, apply, bind. Hello everyone, I'm Ruhani Makhija. Welcome to Code and Cappuccino. In this video, we are going to learn about call, apply, bind. To learn call, apply, bind, we need to have a deep understanding of this keyword. We will first understand how this behaves in an object. Then we will go to the simple examples of call, apply, bind. Then we will learn the syntax of call, apply, bind. Then we will learn the polyfills of call, apply, bind. So let me share my screen and let's get started. So before learning call, bind and apply, you need to have a good understanding of this keyword. In this video, I will explain you this keyword in such a way that you will be able to understand call, bind and apply. But let me tell you, this keyword behaves very differently in case of functions, in case of arrow functions, or maybe in case of objects. So I will explain you how this keyword behaves in an object, so you will have a good understanding of call, bind and apply. So as you can see on my screen, there is one object in which there is a key name Ruhani and there is one method. So whenever there is a function inside an object, that is called a method. So when we have to call the function, we simply do object by greet, right? If I run this code, I'm sure you will know the output probably. That will be Ruhani. If I run this, the output will be Ruhani. So now, what if I am accepting this in a different variable? Let's say that is a variable A. I'm accepting this part in that, and we will write A and we are calling it. If I run this, what will be the output now? Do you think that name is still inside A or it is out of the context of A? If I run this, we will get undefined. It means now this is pointing to the window object. It is not pointing in this object. So whenever there is a method here, this is pointing to this object. We understood that when we did this, right? Object.greet. So we are getting the output Ruhani. It means whatever is inside this object, we are getting it. So that means this is pointing to the object right now. What if we are creating another variable, then calling it? It is out of the context. So call, bind and apply are used when we have to change the reference of this variable. Okay, let me explain you more. With the help of call, bind and apply, we can actually change the reference of this. Let us see how we can do that. Let me again create a variable A. We are calling it. And now we know, right? We will get undefined here because it is so this keyword is right now pointing to the window object and not this object. We want this to point to this so that we can get the name here. Now if we just do dot call and we write the object, it means dot call means we are changing the reference of this to this object. If we run it now, we will get the whatever name is present inside this. I hope you understood the importance of this in call, bind and apply. I will surely explain you call, bind, apply syntax very properly in further video. This is just I'm explaining why we are using call, bind and apply in JavaScript. In short, to change the reference of this. Okay, so let us understand another example. Let me comment the first one. So in this we have again we have an object 1 and we have another object 2. Now in the first object we have one method, in the second we don't. Now what if if we just do object 1 dot function1 and we are just calling it. Can you guess what is the output for this? I'm sure you will be right. If I run this, the output will be 2. 3 is printing because I'm calling something else here. Let me just comment it for now. So the output will be 2 here. Now I want that this method should not point to the object 1 but it should point to object 2. Okay, so again we have to change the reference of this. Again, call, bind and apply can be useful in this case as well, like when we have two objects and we want to point one of the method to any other object. So how can we do that? Simply first, how to point this function, object1 dot function1, right? Now here we just have to do dot call. Like dot call, you can remember, like we are changing the reference of this. So dot call, and what you want to point to, which object you want that this should point. So object 2. If we run it now, okay, I can't do it before declaring, right? If I run it now, so it's pointing to the object 2 right now. I hope you understood this example. Now let us understand few statements. So if you understood these 3 statements, call, bind and apply will be very easy for you in JavaScript. So let us read it one by one and I will explain you deeply. When you want a function to execute in the context of different objects, so we understood, right? We have a function and we want to execute this in a different context. In a different context means we have to execute in object 2 and not object A. So you can use these methods to bind this to desired object, like we are binding this function to another object. So if we did this, right, dot call. So let me show you internally how it behaves. It will behave like this function is not in this object and it is inside this. So internally, if we are doing function1 dot call object 2, so JavaScript will think that this method is not inside object 1 but it's inside object 2. So I hope you understood this example and the first statement. So with the help of first statement, we understood how to change the context with the help of these methods. Now let's read the second one. If you want to borrow a method from one object and use it in another object, so we already understood, right? We have basically borrowed this method in the object 2. I hope you understood this. Now third statement is call, apply and bind allow you to change the reference of this inside a function. So yeah, we are changing the reference, right? So this is it. This is the only use case of call, bind and apply. If you understood this, everything else in the video will be very easy for you. We will just go through the syntax of it. We will kind of try to implement it on harder examples which are usually asked in the interviews. And also we will be learning polyfill of call, bind and apply. So let's get started. We will start with the syntax of it. As you can see on my screen, now we will understand the syntax of call, bind and apply, how we can implement that. We have a function here greet which is accepting 2 arguments, that is age and city, and we are consoling it here. With the age and city, we are also consoling name, right? But if we will normally call this function, this name will actually point to the global object, that is window. In the window object, it is not able to find the name, right? So if we normally call it with the age and with the city, So we will get undefined in place of name. Let me comment the other things first. So undefined in place of name, and age and city we are getting it whatever we passed in the params here. So now we want the name, we want that this function should take the name from this object. So basically again we want to change the reference of this to this object. So how can we change the reference? So we can change the let's understand how can we change the reference with the help of call. So in the syntax of call, so call, bind and apply are applied to the functions. First remember these things. Greet is a function, right? So we are doing dot call. It means call, apply, bind are always applied on to the functions. And in the first param, it takes the object name. Okay, this is the syntax of call. It takes the object name and then individually it takes the arguments of the function. Like let's say we don't have any arguments, so we will not put anything here. I hope you understood this. I can remove the arguments and show as well if you want. So I'm removing the argument, so we can just remove it from here and we run it. So Alice, like we are getting the name here, and if we normally call the functions we were getting undefined because this was pointing to the global object that time. Okay, let me remove this part and I will put the arguments back. And so this is the final example of call. We are applying the call to a function and we are changing the reference of this to the object person. Now it is behaving like this function is inside the object person, and whatever arguments we are giving to the function, like in this example we have the arguments age and city. So if we run it we will get name, age and city. So I hope you understood the example of call. Now apply. So apply is exactly same as a call. The only difference is we give the arguments in an array. If I run it, the output is same. So we are just giving whatever arguments. Let's say there are 3 arguments, so just give it in an array and that's it. Now bind behaves differently than call and apply. Bind will actually return a function to you. So I will actually implement it and show you for bind. So greet.bind. First the syntax, this part is probably same for bind, like we have to write the reference of this. So we want to point to the object person, so we are writing person here. Now again in bind we have to write the arguments individually just like call. So let me copy here. Okay, so here we are giving the arguments like this, but now if I run this part, right, this will not execute immediately. So call and apply, they execute immediately, but bind, it will actually return as a function. And then after that, whenever we want, we can execute it. If I run it, all the outputs are same. So I hope you understood how bind is different to call and apply, because when we how can we use it in development, you know, you will find some cases that you don't have to immediately invoke the function. In that case, bind is very useful. Let me know in the comment section if you have any questions in this in the implementation of call, bind and apply. Now we are going to see some really important interview questions of call, bind and apply. Now I'll be showing you 5 code snippets, and I bet if you understood all 5, you will be able to tackle any question of call, bind and apply. So let's start with the first example. As you can see on my screen, we have one object. So maybe you can pause the video, take a look at the question and try to solve it. And now I'll be explaining you. So let's see if your output is correct. So we have an object. So object dot print name. We are going inside the object. Print name is a method, but we are storing it into a variable, that is print, and then calling it later. So as we are storing it in a different variable and calling it later, the reference of this is changed to global object, right? So as it is changed to global object, it is not finding name, and this will result into undefined. Now the next part is we are binding it with the object with the help of the call method. As we are binding it with the call method to this object, we will get the output, the actual name, that is Alice. And then in the 13th line, we are using bind. So again, we are binding it with the object. So bind will actually return us a function, and then we are calling the function. This will also result into Alice. So let's run the code and see the output. So yeah, so first it is pointing to the global object, and in the next 2 part it is pointing to the object. I hope you understood the first example. Let's check the second one. I would recommend you to read whatever this here it's written before solving the next example. So we have an object here. You can pause the video and think. Right now I'm explaining how this will work. So we have an object here. Again, this object has one method inside it, and we need to understand how call, bind and apply works in set timeout, right? So after 1 second, we are doing person dot say hi. So hi, I am, and we have to understand what the name will be. So you must be thinking that person dot say hi, like we are just pointing to the same method in an object, right? So it should result into hi, I am Alice. But remember, we are using set timeout in this. So after 1 second, it will be like I don't know this this person, and it will start pointing to the global object. This will result into undefined because of that. Yes, it behaves like this with the help of set timeout. But what if we actually want to bind something in set timeout? Then what can we do? Then we can use bind. Yes. So let's understand the statement written here first. So bind permanently sets this value for the bound function. So let's say we are binding this to person. It will permanently set the value. Like now the reference of this cannot be changed. And this is the reason here we are doing person dot say hi, and we are binding it again to the person, right? So after 1 second, this will result into Alice. Let's first see the output. So initially we are getting undefined, then we are getting Alice. So make sure to understand the statement very carefully. Like once this function is bound using bind, so this value cannot be changed. even if you try to change this value with the help of call and apply, it won't change. So with the help of bind, we are permanently setting this value. Let's check the next example. So again we have a object, and this object has one method inside it. We have another object which has some value. Now what we are doing here is object dot print value dot bind. So again we are going inside this and binding with the another object. It means we are changing the reference of this to this this to another object. So it will kind of behave like this method is inside another object and not object. So again you should have remembered it that bind always returns a function. So bound fn is a function. Now this is the important part. Bound fn dot call object. Now here you must be thinking that we are setting the reference of this to object again. But remember the statement, right? Bind permanently sets this value. Like once this value is set with the help of bind, we cannot change it. So still after we are doing this call object, it is still referring to another object as we have used bind before. If I run it, the output will be 100 in this case. So yeah, 100. Let's check the next example. So again we have an object. In the object there is one method. Now a person dot get name dot bind, we are binding this, like changing this reference to again person. It means this is behaving like this is inside the person object only. Again binds return a function. So bound get name is a function. Now we have another object in which we are passing this function. So now this function is kind of a method inside another object. Now we are calling this object dot get name. So bound get name is a function. So it will get called, and here what will it print? Because it is binded to person permanently, right? So it should print Alice. Yeah. Now let's move to the next example. In next example we have a function here, multiply. It takes two arguments a and b. Now we are applying the method bind on it, multiply dot bind. Null means we are not setting this value. We are kind of more concentrating on the parents and arguments in this case. So we are just giving one argument here. So you remember, right? Bind takes the arguments individually just like call. So here 2 is the argument a. So it's like multiply 2 comma b. Still we don't have b. Now bind returns a function again. So double is a function in which we are applying the bind again. Okay, so again triple, like this will return a function, so triple is a function. It takes another argument 3. So this 3 argument will behave like b. So here we have multiply 2 comma 3. Now triple is again a function, right? We are calling with the third argument, that is 4. Now it behaves like multiply 2 comma 3 comma 4. But multiply is only accepting 2 arguments, right? So the output will be 6. If I run this code, here is the output. So I hope you understood all of the 5 example. Next we will be moving to the very important interview questions, that is the polyfills of call, apply, bind. Now we will be starting with the call polyfill. As you can see on my screen, we have a function here, that is print, and we have an object, and we are simply changing the reference of this to the object. This is the very normal example of call. I hope you know the output. If I run it, the output is Alice. So now we want to create our own implementation of call polyfill. So let's start. I don't want to implement call, and at last we have to implement my call, an object, and it should work exactly like call. Okay, so we are creating our own implementation. So we will do function dot prototype dot my call. So call is also a function, right? So we will write function here. Now what arguments call take? First it takes the reference of this, that is we are changing the context of this, but we are usually putting in object here, right? So I will write here context, and the default value of it will be empty object. And second, we are putting the arguments. So we are individually putting the arguments. So I will just spread the arguments. I hope you know about the spread operator. So now we understood like what are the arguments of it. So we will first make some checks. So the main check in this is we are applying my call to only the functions, right? Like the type of this should be a function. So let's do a check that type of this, if it is not a function, we will throw an error. Okay, now the next thing, now this is very important, we have to change this context in the in that particular object, right? So this is the object here, right? We want this to point in this object. So in our polyfill, the object is context, right? So context dot, we are kind of creating a key inside this object, and we are pointing our this to this object. It behaves like we have an object here, right? So assume this as a context for now, and we are creating a key here fn, and we are pointing the this to inside this, like this whole object, the whole function is inside this, kind of this. So this will point to this, right? So this was just for understanding like how we are actually implementing it. And I hope you remember that call and apply, these are the type of function which gets immediately invoked, right? So context dot fn, we are calling it. But what if they have some arguments? So we have to call it with arguments. Yeah, this is it. So this is the implementation of the call polyfill. If I run the function, I should get the output Alice. Yes, I'm getting it. So I hope you understood this. Please comment down if you have any questions. Now we are going to understand about apply. Let me take some arguments in this. Okay, we have not taken any arguments, so probably age. I'll put the comma and write the age here. Let us actually test the implementation of my call with the arguments. Let's take two arguments so we would know that we are able to pass it individually. So age and city are the arguments which I have passed. Here I'll pass the age, the city, and let's run it. Yeah, perfect. So our my call function is absolutely working fine. Now let us implement the apply in a normal way, like the apply method which is in JavaScript. So I hope you remember apply method is exactly same as call. It's just that the arguments are in an array. So if I run it, it's working fine. Now we have to create my apply method. I will just copy this as it is and I will write my apply. Now the only difference is that the arguments are array, right, in the apply. So I will kind of not spread it like this here. I will just write the arguments. Plus we have to make a error check that array dot is array argument. So if they are not an array, like we will throw an error. These part will be exactly same. We are spreading it and giving it. Let's just check. Yes, so I mean now call and apply polyfills are probably the same, so it would be easy for you to understand it. But of course bind polyfill is little bit different, as bind is returning another function, right? So let's move to the bind polyfill now. We are going to understand about bind polyfill. As you can see on my screen, I have written a very normal example of bind. We have a function, we have an object, and this function, we are changing the reference of this to this particular object. Also, in the function, we have two arguments, age and city, which we are passing it here, and bind always returns another function. So we are returning another function and calling it. If we run it, we will get all the values correct. So now I wanted to tell you one thing about bind is that I can also remove the arguments from here and put it here. This will also work fine. So the first argument it will consider as age, and the second argument it is considered as city. If we run it, so it works the same way. So these all the cases we have to handle while creating the polyfill of bind. So let's get started. So here I am creating function dot prototype dot my bind. It is a function. It takes the same arguments as the call, right? So context and arguments are individually there. We will handle the error handling cases as well. If the type of this is not a function, then we need to throw an error. Now we have to first change the context of this. So another key we are creating and we are changing the context. Now here bind doesn't invoke immediately, but it returns another function. So we are kind of returning a function here. This function which we are returning, it can have any arguments, right? So let me name it new args. And inside this function, what we have to do, like is doing here, we are just invoking the particular function, right, which is in the context. So we are just doing context dot function. Now the function which is getting invoked should have both the arguments, right? Even if we are passing the arguments here on the top, also which we are passing down. So the argument behaves always in order. So we will first take the arguments which is passed on the top, and then when we are invoking the function, if we are passing any arguments, this should combine. So I hope you know what the spread operator does. So if we are spreading it like this, it will be like let me show you. Let's say this is the function, it will kind of combine like this. So this is how the function will get called at the end. So yeah, this is it. This is the bind polyfill. Let us see if it works fine. Now instead of bind, I'm putting my bind here, and let's run it. So yeah, we are getting the correct output. Let us remove this argument from here and put it here and check if it's giving the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, this is all. This is what call, apply and bind polyfills are. I hope you understood the video. If you have any questions, do comment below. Also, I would really like if you give suggestions of the topics you want me to make the video of. So do comment below the topics you want of a video. Do subscribe to the channel, do like the video. See you in the next video.